Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're looking at something profoundly structural. We're digging into the actual mechanics of inner power and emotional command. We're going to be exploring a framework called the architect's logic, and specifically how high performers design their internal operating systems to move away from all that everyday chaos and finally step into true inner sovereignty. Right off the bat, I want to anchor our entire explainer in this one incredibly reflective quote from our source material. Transformation is not a dramatic emotional event. It is the slow consequence of repeated alignment. I absolutely love this because we are moving completely away from the superficial hype of instant manifestation. What we're examining today is a philosophically grounded, highly intellectual approach to redesigning your mind. It's about building an internal system so reliable, so airtight, that alignment just becomes your default state. Section 1. Matter over spirit, the default pattern. To understand how to build this system, we really first have to understand the core problem, right? Unconscious reactivity. In our default state, our physical and emotional reactions, which we'll call matter, completely dominate our conscious mind, which we'll call spirit. Let's look at how this actually plays out in real time through what's called the untrained sequence. It happens in 3 incredibly rapid steps. First, a stimulus occurs. Maybe a colleague challenges your idea in a reading, or your partner makes a loaded comment like, "You never listen." Second, your nervous system instantly activates. Your prefrontal cortex, your logical control center, literally goes offline. And third, the default reaction takes over. You feel shame, then anger, you fire back defensively, and the whole situation just unravels. Now, a lot of us, especially high achievers, kind of fool ourselves into thinking we're handling this by just pushing the feelings down. But the source makes a crucial distinction here between suppression and regulation. Suppression is really just a defensive maneuver. When you push away anger or fear, your sympathetic nervous system actually stays activated. The emotion doesn't vanish, it just goes underground and explodes later as anxiety, physical tension, or sudden outburst. True regulation, on the other hand, is an adaptive strategy. It involves actually acknowledging, naming, and intelligently managing the emotion as it happens. Section 2. The inversion strategy. Spirit over matter. So, how do we actually shift from suppression to true regulation? We use a profound philosophical awakening known as the Baphomet Protocol. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the clear dichotomy between the psychocosmos, the realm of mind, and the hylocosmos, the realm of physical matter. The Baphomet Protocol is the active, deliberate inversion of our default state. Instead of your body controlling your mind, you update your core beliefs so that pure consciousness sits above and directs your physical impulses. You're putting light back in command of mass. The primary tool to cross that boundary is something called a perspective shift. This is a cognitive reframe that fundamentally changes the meaning of a moment. Because, think about it, emotional intensity isn't just about what happened. It's heavily shaped by your interpretation of what happened. When you shift your perspective from "this is dangerous" to "this is data," or from "this is rejection" to "this is feedback," you literally update the meaning of the event. This single shift drastically reduces the emotional grip of the trigger. It's a real game changer. Section 3. Exposing hidden self-sabotage. To move from philosophical theory to practical architecture, we have to expose our own hidden automated loops. I want you to try a quick inversion exercise right now. Ask yourself, if I wanted to absolutely guarantee my failure in managing my emotions today, what exactly would I do? Well, you'd probably wrench your self-worth from the outside, right? The real tragedy of modern behavioral loops is validation addiction. When your mood depends entirely on a warm response from someone else, your identity is completely reactive. You aren't building self-worth, you're outsourcing it. Exposing this dependency is the very first step to dismantling it. To dismantle these loops, we have to build a map. The source calls this trigger inventory mapping. For your top recurring triggers, you need to honestly answer these questions. What usually happens externally? What happens internally, like physically in those first few seconds? What is your body doing right now? And what do you typically do that you later regret? Actually, take a second to really think about that. So, the crucial point is this. You are building a map of your hijack patterns. You absolutely cannot expand a window of control that you haven't even located yet. Let's move to Section 4, the protocols of command, and see how this builds. Once you map your triggers, you need acute neurological tools to physically slow down the reaction sequence. The first tool is the sensory anchor. Now, this isn't just about being calm. It's a highly specific grounding protocol that interrupts emotional escalation by forcing your attention firmly back to the present physical environment. It's the classic 5-4-3-2-1 method. Identify 5 things you can see, 4 you can feel, 3 you can hear, 2 you can smell, and 1 you can taste. Doing this actually breaks the mental loop of panic or anger and stabilizes you long enough to face the problem intelligently. The second tool is the 3-second breath wedge. This is all about deliberate, empowering system design. You literally set an alarm on your phone a few times a day. When it rings, you take 15 seconds to scan from head to toe and simply label your physical sensations: jaw tight, chest heavy. You are actively training your capacity to notice physical activation long before it turns into a regrettable email or a sharp comment. The ultimate result of deploying these tools is a complete shift in existence. And this brilliantly illustrates what we're talking about. On the left, we see the alienated mind, trapped in chains, blindly following unwritten rules, completely reactive to the environment. But on the right, the illuminated mind. By using these protocols to break the chains of dogmatic, reactive behavior, you step into inner-directed autonomy. You actually begin operating from a solid core of self-knowledge, rather than chasing external validation. Section 5, Reclaiming Inner Sovereignty. This brings us to our ultimate goal. Emotional stability is not some personality trait reserved for a lucky few. It is an engineered state. It's the direct product of repeated design decisions about how you interpret and interact with your own biology. The architect's logic is ultimately about an existential identity shift. The secret is not dominating others, it is apoptosis, mastering yourself. It is reaching a state where your values finally overcome your impulses, where purpose sits over reactivity, and where the individual finally runs the nervous system instead of the nervous system running the individual. I want to leave you with this lingering thought from the source material. Once you begin this architectural redesign, you stop asking, how do I stop reacting? Instead, you begin asking yourself, what kind of person am I becoming when I respond with discipline? Let that land for a moment. Your internal condition is not always chosen, but your stewardship of it absolutely must be. Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and I highly encourage you to start mapping those triggers today.